Welcome to Rumble number 19, the PSAP edition. I'm Margaret Butler, and I'm going to moderate tonight. I've lived in Portland my entire life, and I have spent 40 years in the labor movement and organizing workers. And when I retired from paid work, I changed to focusing on the climate crisis that we're all here concerned about. And so I work with Extinction Rebellion. And I want to start with just a few housekeeping things. The bathrooms, if you have not yet found them, are straight through to the back room and then turn right through the curtains. And there are 2 bathrooms back there. There are some lovely snacks in the back, and you're welcome to bring some in here with you. Just don't throw them, okay? And I want to say thank you to a lot of people who have done a lot of things to make this happen. First, if we can change the slide, this is our 43 co-sponsoring organizations. I'm not going to read them all this time. I also want to say thank you to the People's Court, to Braided River for providing extra chairs, and of course to Dharma for welcoming us. To Mac for designing the programs for the Rumbles over and over again. To the Rumble Committee for all the work that we've done. And let me see if I left anything else out. Oh, and Barbara for doing the video. If you're able, there's a donation bucket back there, and we'd like to make a donation to our venue, and also often pay for videotaping. So if you can make a donation, that's great. So I'm going to do the original people's acknowledgement. We are gathered here on stolen land, focused on solving some of the issues created by 500 years of colonization, genocide of indigenous people, theft, and broken promises. So we want to acknowledge the peoples who have lived here for tens of thousands of years. The Portland metro area rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River, living in right relationship with the land and the water, and knowing themselves to be part of the web of life. These original peoples continue to steward the land and work for a return to that right relationship. We want to support that work and work to repair the damage, and PSEF is part of repairing that damage as we do our work. To take concrete action, you can support the Chinook Nation's push to regain federal recognition that was granted in 2001 and taken away 18 months later. So go to chinookjustice.org and you can sign a petition, make a donation, and support that work. Now I'd like to have Leslie come up and introduce you to this piece of land and to our hosts here at Dharma.
Don't go in front of it. Okay. Thank you, Margaret. Before I introduce the abbot of Dharma Rain, I want to provide a transition between Margaret's land acknowledgement and the more recent history of this land we sit on tonight. Prior to 1971, this land was used as a quarry pit. From 1972 to 1982, this was a 26-acre construction and demolition debris landfill. The landfill was capped in 1982, and various development proposals were made, including for a Walmart store, which neighbors opposed. In 2012, the Dharma Rain Zen Center purchased 14 acres of this former landfill property and built this beautiful temple. With assistance from governmental and nonprofit partners, Dharma Rain is healing this formerly abused and neglected property. It now serves the neighborhood as a much-needed green space, as a landscape with a thriving native plant community, as a refuge for area wildlife, and as a resource for school children, families, gardeners, dog walkers, and birders. And I might add coyotes. As a neighbor to this magical place, I am so grateful. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dharma Rain's abbot, Kakamil Lo Chardet, to welcome you all and share more.
Thank you. Thank you for being here for this event, lending your attention to these causes. I feel like it's really important. I feel like it's really important personally, but also like as a Buddhist, like these are issues that are just really critical. One of the things that we practice here is gaining more insight into interdependence, how we impact the world around us, how our intentions and our actions ripple out, and that's also into the environment. And so this, what's happening here tonight is an important part of that. Dharma Rain is a Buddhist temple. We have a whole ton of programs for the general public. We teach meditation, we have things for kids, all sorts of stuff. That's for folks who are just dropping in. That's for folks who are like lifelong committed and into very intensive practice. So anywhere along that spectrum. The site is one of our early aspirations was to have a third of the site devoted to native habitat, a third for cultivated green space, and a third for development. And actually it's tilted heavier towards native habitat. We're about 50% right now, and that's pretty awesome. And I think that's actually growing. So it's a really it's great to like live somewhere and work on this land and just like see the little changes, month after month and decade after decade. Now we're into that. I think that's important stuff. Thank you all for being here. Have a great night.
So this is Rumble 19, and we started these rumbles on the river to educate the public about the critical energy infrastructure hub and Zenith. And then we broadened out to look at solutions, to look at other issues that were related to those things, and we keep on rolling. We keep on rumbling because there's always so much more to do. I live in this neighborhood. My daughter went to high school across the street. I walk up Rocky Butte at least once a week, and I love what has happened to this old landfill. It's just so inspiring to me. And I'm really excited about this rumble because what PSEF is doing and has done is really inspiring. I first heard about the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund, or the initiative, in the Portland airport in 2016 or 17. Rich and I were going somewhere, and Joanne Hardesty was at the gate with us, and so we talked for about an hour, and I went, whoa, that's really going to happen in Portland? That's so great that we are actually going to figure out a way to take money from the biggest corporations making profit, remember I was a workers' rights organizer, and give it to people to do climate-related equity projects. What could be better? And the people of Portland agreed. So that was so cool. And the Rumble team decided we wanted to do one, the PSEF edition, focused here, because this is really a big deal. It's a big deal that we passed this initiative. It's taking money from a place it shouldn't be and putting it in a place it should be. And Portland people did that, and we need to remind ourselves and the community of that fact, and also be ready to defend PSEF as people make other plans or try to weaken it in other ways. So that's what we're here for, and I hope you'll go away with an increased understanding of this awesome thing that Portland did, and spread the word and help support it and make it a success. Now I get to introduce our panel. First, we're going to hear from State Senator Pham, Senator-elect, who's going to tell us a lot about the organizing that went into it. And you know, I've known Khanh for 25 years, maybe, and I just appreciate so much her commitment to community organizing and using her elected position to continue to organize. And then we're going to hear from Pham Baraso, who's the lead staff person for PSEF and has shepherded it through all sorts of challenges and trials to help make it the success it is now. And Micah Meskel with the Bird Alliance of Portland, who has been with PSEF from the beginning, also supporting the campaign and supporting all the ins and outs of dealing with the politics since then. So I'm going to turn it over to Khanh. Jen is our timekeeper, so she will keep us all on schedule.
Thank you so much. Before we get started, I just wanted to just recognize that right now I'm carrying the people in Los Angeles right now who are being impacted by, I think, up to 5 simultaneous conflagrations that people are still escaping from right now. People had to flee with just whatever they could grab and just flee their homes for safety. And I'm really holding them in my heart right now. I know so many of us have people who have been impacted, who live in that area, LA County, and know friends, or at least know people who've been impacted. And I think as we increasingly see the impacts of the deepening climate crisis, it's so important for us to really hold clear this vision of the necessary transition to a renewable economy and the necessity of it being a just transition. And so that's really the spirit that the Portland Clean Energy Fund was started in, was recognizing that this is the future. It's already baked in, but we can actually determine how we transition. And so with that, I will start with my slideshow presentation. Thank you for taking a breath with me on that. Okay, so you can go to the next slide. I wanted to share a little bit more about myself because Sam and Micah will talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the program right now, but so much for me of the Portland Clean Energy Fund campaign was the story of like how I was developed as a leader is so intricately tied to the story of the Clean Energy Fund. I'm the daughter of Vietnamese immigrants, refugees who came here in 1975, and I've been a long-time community organizer. I'm a mom. My daughter is in the back there, and all of these identities really moved me to want to take action. As someone who visited Vietnam regularly, I still visit Vietnam regularly, less so now, but even 20 years ago, people were experiencing the impacts of climate change. And the injustice of that really struck me, that the people least responsible have to still bear some of the biggest impacts. And then I found out that here in Portland too, that's the same dynamic, where some of the people who are lowest income and the least able to adapt are also the ones who have to bear the brunt of it. So So yeah, I guess I'll just start with that and we'll go to the next slide. So PSAF started from the basic problem that as communities of color, we were working together to try to figure out climate change adaptation. Many of our communities were directly experiencing the impacts, and yet we were being excluded from the benefits of a green economy. We were hit hardest and first by the impacts of the heat waves and the wildfires and the smoke events, but not getting the jobs and the cost savings that come when you retrofit your home. And when we would come to our city councilors or elected leaders and say, hey, can you fund this great program, or can you do this? We really want you to help fund this program. They would always say, that's a really nice idea, but we just don't have the money. And we knew that the money was out there, and so we went about partnering with some of our grassroots environmental partners to find a way to get that money. The Portland Clean Energy Fund is, as you all know, it's a 1% business license surcharge on billion-dollar corporations. You have to make over $1 billion a year nationally, $500,000 in Portland sales. And it was actually happening in the context of Trump 1.0, when Trump had just passed these huge corporate tax cuts benefiting the wealthiest individuals and corporations. And so we used to call one of our organizers Carrie Waters. And I'll recognize some of the old organizers like Damon Montstory, who are also here. Carrie used to say, this is 1% from the 1%. That really just captured our ethos. Okay, next slide. And at the time, we were also learning about a strategy framework for a just transition. How do we move from this extractive economy to a more regenerative, equitable economy, a caring economy, and draw the resources down from these big multinational corporations and kind of you can move to the next slide, really shift economic control to more local communities so that this capital is really controlled by communities who can determine where it's most needed. You can go to the next slide. So we formed a steering committee. I was working at Apano as the environmental justice manager, and the Coalition of Communities of Color, which includes NEA, Latino Network, Verde, many other community of color-led organizations partnered with 350 PDX. Oh, you can go back to the next slide, or the previous slide. 350 PDX, Columbia Riverkeeper, the Bird Alliance, Sierra Club, and we formed the steering committee that then went around trying to build this broad multi-sectoral coalition. We talked to small business groups, we talked to neighborhood associations, we talked to labor, and you can see some pictures here. It was really a grassroots campaign. We had no experience passing a ballot measure, but we found that we tapped into this enthusiasm amongst Portlanders who were looking for something hopeful and something. This experience has really taught me that people are just looking for you to ask them to do something big, because many of you in the room were part of it, and I will forever just be in awe and just moved by just people who they were like almost, it was their job. They would go, and I know some people told me, like, I'm really shy actually, like I don't like going up to strangers, but I feel so passionate about the Portland Clean Energy Fund, I am stretching myself. And that just really moved me, that people, I think in this crisis, we have to all learn how to stretch ourselves. So we'd go to, this is like, I think at one of the summer festivals, we went door knocking. This is the Portland Power Squad. We did street theater. It really we didn't know any better, and I think a lot of people who were political consultants thought, this is never gonna pass. You can't gather that many signatures in 7 weeks. And a lot of naysayers, but I think one of the benefits of not having experience is we didn't know that we couldn't do it. And so you can go to the next slide. So I'm happy to report that in November of 2018, we passed overwhelmingly at the ballot at a over 2-to-1 ratio against some of the largest corporations in the world. And these businesses, they did oppose us, but they did their own polling, and they knew Portlanders support this on such an overwhelming basis. They didn't even bother opposing it. They went through the motions. They did oppose it. We'll find out later they opposed it after we passed it. But yeah, it's just such an amazing community victory, and it's something that really taught us a lot of lessons and really developed me as a leader, and developed so many other folks who were part of the coalition. Can you go to the next slide? So I'll let Sam talk a little bit more about how the the fund works, right, Sam? You're going to talk about that? Okay, we can move to the next slide. And he's also going to talk more about the grants. Micah is also going to talk more about the grants. I will lift up Cooling Portland as something I think is so important. After the heat dome, the deadly heat dome event, PSEF was able to pivot and devote $16.3 million and commit to serving 15,000 homes, low-income households who need life-saving heat pumps or cooling pumps. It's, air conditioning, energy-efficient air conditioning, because we know that in this new climate change era, having access to cooling is not just a nice to have, it's an issue of life or death. So we will, I'm just so in love with all of the different grants that we're going to be talking about tonight. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so after we won in November of 2018, our coalition, I remember, actually Mike was like, what are we doing next? Who's running for office next? I think you actually asked me, when are you running? And I just laughed. I just laughed. That's so funny. It's such a joke. But I was part of the Oregon Just Transition Alliance. And so we said, let's move it to the state level. And so we went and did a statewide listening tour. We called it the Oregon Green New Deal Listening Tour. And this was in 2020, and we heard from communities around the state. And this was amidst wildfires, it was amidst the racial justice protests, there was a pandemic. But people said they want to see us investing in resilient communities and a just recovery from these climate disasters. We want to be building healthy communities that are also creating jobs that center workers. We want to be dismantling racism and white supremacy in Oregon. And advancing the clean energy opportunity economy. So after, next slide, you can go to the next slide. So we took that model that we developed with PSEF and said, okay, this is a model that works, like the partnership, but really making sure we're led by frontline communities. Okay, I'll keep going. And we kind of go back, I was talking to myself. So we built this Energy Justice Leadership Institute that taught people how to advocate, how to lobby their legislators. Next slide. And so I asked myself, how are we going to, at the end, in the mid-2020, I was saying, okay, how are we going to pass this at the state level? And then my predecessor, Elissa Kenny-Geyer, decided not to run for re-election. And so my community asked me to run for this seat. And so if it wasn't for PSEF, which gave me the confidence to know I could run an electoral campaign, I knew how to do door knocking and run a field campaign, that I would never have gotten the confidence to run. So that was really critical, and it led to my winning in 2020 in November. Next slide. And I was able to work on the bills that we worked on as in the Oregon Just Transition Alliance. And I'll just go really quickly through them. We won't talk about them, but the Oregon Energy Affordability Act, Healthy Homes, 100% clean energy for all. Next slide. In the next session, in 23, we were able to pass the TREES Act to invest in community green infrastructure and shade equity for communities that don't have shade, community resilience hubs, which is led by frontline communities, OJTA. You can see it's different, it's statewide, but there's many of the same organizations, and with a real emphasis on the communities most impacted. And the next slide. I guess I'll just end with some reflections from what I've learned. I really love this quote from Movement Generation that says, if we're not prepared to govern, we're not prepared to win. And I was somebody who is I've always been really afraid of politics for a long time of my organizing and activist life, but I think I've learned that because I always want to be right, I always want to be pure, I don't want to be criticized, and all those things that come with governing, which is compromising and having to be called out or criticized, and I think I hope that our movements can really take seriously what it means to govern. In this moment, it's so important that we actually win for our communities. We also have to be prepared to defend our policies after we win. Often we win these campaigns and then we go on to the next thing, but it's been clear to us that we have to actually form continue to organize the same multiracial, cross-class, intergenerational organizations and coalitions and movements if we want to be able to defend our wins. So I hope we can also continue to focus on implementation. And I say this model of frontline leadership and privileged capacity, that's what we called it. I think, Damon, you might have used that word, but frontline leadership and privileged capacity support it worked for Portland. I don't know if it'll work everywhere in every city, but I'll say, as I think about the kinds of multiracial, intergenerational movements we're going to need to face Trump 2.0 and the very real threats he poses to our communities and to our democracy and to our laws, we're going to need to rebuild some of those movements, some of those organizing muscles that we've let atrophy. So I really think PSF offers a lot of models for us and hopefully inspiration and fire for us as we get ready to organize our communities for what's to come in 25. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. It's wonderful to present alongside you, for you to carry that, because that's a beautiful story, and it carries so much of why PSF is a gift to the city. So, next slide. Sam Baraso, the program manager at the City of Portland. The Portland Clean Energy Fund is now a program of the city. The Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is where we sit. Next slide. But for today, I'm going to speak to a little bit of the journey of PSF since it's come into the city and it's become a program of the city. And then I'll talk about some of that evolution. I'll talk about a climate investment plan, which is our overarching document that guides the way we make our investments. And then I'll just talk about the updates since then. It's been a wild ride. You all have seen some of it, but I want to clue you all into where we're at today and some of what lies ahead. Next slide. And knowing that you've got time on me, that you're going to keep me to time, I'm probably going to skip a couple slides. I think what I'll share here. What I'll share here is that I think I saw it on your side. It said 60 million. The numbers ticked up. We're now generating over $200 million annually into the program. So that 1% from the 1% for the 99% is very big. And to date, we've awarded over 545 million grants awarded. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those. But next slide. It's a lot, and you'll see more. So I'll talk in this next bit about just where we've been, what was the original design, and how we've had to pivot and adjust as we've responded to what it means to take a community vision into government, breathe life into it, and then realize the changes and adaptations we need to make. So it's a lot about what the next slides are. Next slide. So originally, the original incarnation was that, Revenue Bureau, and this remains the same, collects the surcharge, the clean energy surcharge. We at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, the PSF team, issues, we do a call for proposals, for grant proposals. It's limited to nonprofit organizations. We then score them all. We have a PSF committee, a 9-member volunteer committee who has done a tremendous amount of work over the past 5 years in providing oversight and making funding recommendations. And then they make the funding recommendations ultimately that we carry forward to City Council. And then we execute those grant agreements and we work with our grantees and all that to carry out the projects. Our grantees being the very community that makes PSF real. We talk about PSF, but it's so much about the organizations that do this work to make it real. That was the original design of what PSF was when it started out. Next slide. And in that, we did a tremendous amount of good, and we continue to do a tremendous amount of good, and that remains the core heart of what we've done. At the top is a project that we funded first with May at their high utility property right off of Prescott and 70th or so, where we did some heat pump water heaters. The bottom two on the left side is a project that we funded with DPAVE. The top is the before, the bottom is the after. And we've got a range of some workforce development in the middle there, Gardens by Growing Gardens. We've got some work on Sammy Lewis's house by, I believe, Community Energy Projects, who's here. And then we've got work by Leaders Become Legends, POIC, others, and a whole host of investments we've made in workforce development. So this is just some of the work that we seeded with those in our early rounds, and much of which continues to this day. But I want to talk about what we did afterwards and how we grew the pool of resources. Next slide. And so what played out is by the time we got to a pandemic happened, a whole host of things happened. By the time we got to about early 2022, we started getting real line of sight into the resources. We had also been implementing the program and had at least 1-2 rounds under our belt at that point. And what we saw was the fund forecast went from 40 to 60 million to 80 million to 90 million and just kept growing. And what we recognized at that point is for that scale of resources, we would need to be able to invest those resources and invest in community in not only nonprofits, but we needed more folks at the table to help us implement projects. And that recognizing that it takes time to grow our organizations from doing these projects from year one to what it'll look like 20 years from now. And so in addition to that, we had an early audit that was fair for a program, but was fairly bruising for the program in terms of the media. And we had a whole host of some early bad coverage, leadership transitions. We took a good set of meetings in 2022. And so we worked with Commissioner Rubio at the time in order to make a whole sweeping set of changes in order to address some of those things, with the objective of, number one, identifying changes to the program to enable us to accelerate funding in alignment with the core program intent. So we wanted to be like, how do we move more money into the community faster? It's important that this doesn't just sit in our coffers. How do we draw clearer and more relevant connections between PSEF and the city's climate action goals? The city's climate action plan was drafted before PSEF, and yet there was a mismatch there. And we need to draw more relevant connections. How do we address administrative and just operational needs identified by the staff and committee? And then just capturing and addressing some remaining audit recommendations. Next slide. So at the high level, this is getting to, but what we did was we set the framework that instead of bounding ourselves with some of the limitations within our code, we'd establish a 5-year climate investment plan. Every 5 years, we come back and we develop this climate investment plan. It allows us to adjust, it allows us to pivot, but it acknowledges that the landscape changes in terms of the investments that we need to make, whether in workforce development, green infrastructure, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. We need to be able to see what the community needs, when, and we need to be able to adjust those, but give us a runway for 5 years to make those things happen. And so the climate investment plan was where we really anchored how we were going to make our investments, but also a document to share to the public so that the public could hold us accountable to the kind of investments, the kind of outcomes you would see as part of those investments, and that it would sit there. There's a couple changes we did to really line up our code document and make sure that it gave us the adjustments so that we could invest our resources through government partners. Many of the partners that work on our street trees or our roads, that they're folks that do work in other avenues that serve the community and leveraging those avenues. But also adding things like transportation decarbonization, which was not called out in the original ballot measure. Adding things like capacity building, because doing this was core. I see my time, now I gotta hustle. So those are some of the changes. Next slide. We went on a journey, developed a climate investment plan, launched the climate investment plan, begun implementation, and went with our next round of community grants, which was kicked off in late 2023, ended up in 2024, and we awarded those in September, $92 million in funds, another round of which will open this spring. Next slide. Climate investment plan. Next slide. So the climate investment plan, the original one, adopted in September of 2023, allocated about $750 million over 5 years. Allocated it through strategic programs and our community grants. Those are our two real avenues of funding. Our community grants, that is the heart of what we've done. That was the original design, and the expansion into strategic programs. Next slide. But not too long after we passed that, I swear, like 5 weeks later, we get a call from the city economist, and he says, "Come on in, y'all." He was like, "Some folks told me to look into Walmart leaving, Target closing up, and just understand the impacts." And he's like, "I think you're pulling in more money than you all think." And so it was a surprise, but we were going to be pulling in at least 500, 600 million more over that time frame than we had planned.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years, yes. Correct, thank you. That's important. But over 5 years, going from 750 million to well over $1 billion. And so we had to hustle. And so we brought in our city colleagues at that point, and we said, partners, bureaus, you all have projects you've wanted to do over many years. We want to see the projects you all have right now that you can do tomorrow. We know you all can dream big. We're not asking you to dream big. We want to know what you can do that's been on the wait list that you've needed to do for many years. We pulled those in, and we picked up projects, including taking over the street tree maintenance for that sits on all the property owners and making sure the city takes that over, including addressing things like bike lanes and sidewalks and things that the city has fallen behind on. And so those are the city climate projects. We ultimately came back, made ultimate amendments back just in December of this year, capture all those, increased funding to our community grants, but also did the Collaborating for Climate Action process. Next slide. And this just gives you a little picture of some of the projects you're going to start to see, including, I love this thing here. It's our Bureau of Transportation now has an electric bike lane sweeper that you get to see running around town. You'll see our Parks and Recreation ultimately take over the street tree maintenance over the coming 5 years. And a whole host of other things, including our Collaborating for Climate Action grants, which we just recently awarded. Next slide. Overall, I'm not going to get into this. I can come back to this if there's questions. This gives the breakdown of our funding across our funding areas. Largest is in our renewable energy and energy efficiency, then green infrastructure, and then transportation decarbonization. Next slide. In terms of pool of resources and those that are implementing those, city bureaus getting about 600 million. RFPs, meaning where we bring in contractors to run programs for us, about 300 million. Community grants, about 300 million. Collaborating for Climate Action was 300 million. Public schools got 50 million, but they actually got another 70 million through Collaborating for Climate Action. So our school districts are getting about 120 million through PSEF. Next slide. And I'll just end with this. PSEF is a tremendous amount of resources. Without a doubt, it's something unique to this city. It is the hallmark of the city. It is a shining star for the city and something that no other city has. And yet at the same end, it's important to realize the scale of investment we need to get to our climate goals with just the things that we invest in, not the utilities, not the grid, not everything else, is 50 billion. Just to deal with priority populations, we're talking 18 billion. In our 5-year plan, we're still just at 1.6 billion. So I just want to acknowledge that it will still take, at the scale of what PSEF has, more resources, more policy actions, all of us to individually act, but it'll take much more. And so PSEF is big, it's significant, it means a lot to the city, it is a shining star for the city, and yet there's going to need to be more. So it's important not to rest on our laurels and continue to push those actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Senator-elect. It's nice to say that, Khanh. So I'll start with, I'll introduce myself. My name is Micah Meskel, and I'm with the Bird Alliance of Oregon, and I'm the director of our urban conservation efforts. And I'm both honored and humbled to be on a panel with these two. We have the preeminent climate justice champion at our state legislature in Senator-elect Pham, and preeminent leader within the Democratic Party. And then we have my favorite bureaucrat. Endearing. You are Sam. Sam has been so instrumental into seeing PSEF from day one, pretty much, and lifting up a completely new program, new concept, and implementing it, and navigating some of the most difficult political times and nuanced situations over that time to really see the program grow, evolve, and still maintain its core benefit and mission. And it's just been great to see both of you through the 7 years of this program. And as a advocate who got the honor of being part of the early campaign to collect signatures, pass it, and then to move forward in sort of implementation and watchdogging, which is sort of a role that the Bird Alliance and many other organizations do in our efforts of longstanding policy work. There is the victory of securing a policy, but what's more important is seeing it through and protecting it from being weakened. And that has been a long journey over the last 7 years. And those 7 years have seen some really great accomplishments, both in what the program has become, but also in the defense of what could have been lost. And many of you were so instrumental to those efforts. And tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple, as the evolution of the program has moved on over the last couple of years, how the shift of investments to the city is both, from my perspective and in the perspective of my organization, has been able to both bolster and extend the city's climate work across a lot of different spaces, but also help it evolve and help bring it into even closer alignment with community, both in the visioning, but also implementation of some of those efforts. I think, I'll start with one of the key, or I think one of my favorite strategic initiatives within the first climate investment plan, and that is the Equitable Tree Canopy Initiative, which was slated, it was allocated $40 million to, just a significant amount for tree planting across the city over 5 years. And this is a space that the city had previously been in some tough places, and PSEF was really a lifeline for extending that program and for helping bring Portland Parks and the Urban Forestry Program and the community groups in alignment through that strategic funding that has really helped shape sort of a transformative program that is really building out a system in which the city is able to lean into its capacity, its stretch across the landscape, its significant resources, and bring community in to play a role to help build our tree canopy throughout the city, and to really focus it on meeting equity goals of bringing trees to the landscapes that have historically not had them. And I think it's a really great example of how the strategic initiatives that PSEF is funding and helping lead is really bringing forward PSEF's priorities and bringing the city and community along at the same time to implement. And it looks like my time is up. I'm going to speak a little bit later about some community projects that I have been a part of that I think are a really exciting aspect of PSEF, and the most exciting aspect of PSEF are community grants, I think. So I will pass it off.
Thank you to all of you. What we're going to do now is turn to this side and hear from 3 recipients, and then Micah will be the 4th recipient who gets to talk about their experience with receiving the money that was generated here. And so today we have with us Abasi Umo, who's an in-home auditor from the Community Energy Project, who's going to go first, and then we'll hear from Corey Pearson, who's the Community Garden Manager with the Rosewood Initiative, and then we'll hear from Steve or Chesborough from Bike Loud. So, Basi, go first.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming out tonight so we can all learn more about PSEF and the incredible things it's doing for our city. My name is Abasi Umo, and I work with Community Energy Project as an in-homes auditor. CEP is a nonprofit that works to reduce carbon emissions and help low-income and BIPOC Oregonians live in safe, healthy, and comfortable homes. Yes, honestly. And we're able to put in so much work and achieve this through our 3 departments, which are education, advocacy, and in-homes departments. So our education department conducts workshops that empower residents to employ renter-friendly weatherization upgrades to their homes. And we do provide access to the materials and the education to do that. All of our services are completely free. Our advocacy team works at a legislative level to fight against utility increases and to ensure public access to income-qualified utility bill discount programs. Yes. I know we are all feeling those utility increases. And the in-homes team, which is the team I'm a part of, we work to implement weatherization upgrades such as installing heat pump water heaters, air sealing homes, insulating them. There's a whole host of other vital home performance measures that we're also that we're able to install. And CEP as a whole does a lot more than that, but I'm also seeing timekeeping throughout the night, so I'll just keep it broad. And now to kind of tie this back to PSEF and to give you an idea of how CEP and PSEF have been able to work together to have such a profound impact on our community. CEP has retrofitted over 100 low-income and BIPOC homes. so far through our PSEF grant. So, we're just ramping up. Just wait, keep tabs on us, see us in 2025, because there's going to be a lot more work that we're doing. We take a house as a system approach, which means that we take the entire home's health into account, and part of the home is the folk who are living in the home. So we take all of that into account when we're determining what upgrades that we're going to be able to help with. Because we do those whole home retrofits, our average PSEF project cost a staggering $40,000. And a lot of Portlanders don't have $40,000 in general, but especially to be putting into their home. And even though it is so crucial, it's about our health, personally, like our physical human health. It's also about reducing carbon emissions for our entire planet. And so just because you don't have access to be able to make those types of energy efficiency improvements, we all know, we're all here tonight, we know that it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have access to those. And so that's where we're able to step in with funding from PSEF, who is our largest donor, to be able to make those types of upgrades for folk. And so just to give you an idea, so while we're improving the efficiency of the homes that we've worked in, for like a number to really be able to visualize this, we've saved $54,000 last year in utility bills just through creating or weatherizing homes to make them more efficient. And that breaks down to saving an average of $750 in each home that we worked in, which that, I'm seeing time, thank you. That's not just putting that $750 back into the pockets of low-income and BIPOC families. It is doing that, but it's also putting less of a strain on our grid, and it's reducing carbon emissions. So no matter what way you look at it, that is a win-win-win scenario. And that's all backed by PSEF. And just to close, I just want to say that we've had the pleasure of working with so many Portlanders who have not had access to hot water in their homes for years because their water heater broke, say, in 2018, and they never had the funds to be able to replace it. The same thing goes with heating and cooling their home. We've worked with a lot of folk who haven't had heating in their home, and we've had a beautiful, mild winter so far this year, but we know what it feels like, what Portland winters can get to, and it's not safe. So everybody needs to be able to heat their home, to cool their home now, as temperatures are just getting hotter and hotter. And so just to close, again, PSEF, our biggest funder, and is largely the reason why we're able to take the approach that we take, which is people first, and address the entire house at once. So thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. First of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for enabling us to do the work that we do. Please bear with me as I am a little more comfortable with plants than people. My name is Corey Pearson. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Community Garden Project Manager with the Rosewood Initiative and PAIR. So if you've never heard of either of those organizations, the Rosewood Initiative is a community-based resource provider out in the Rosewood neighborhood, which is in Southeast Portland. And we do, economic support, food pantries, events and classes at our community center, all types of resources for our very diverse community with many immigrant families, many families of color, many low-income families. PAIR is an organization that provides support to houseless youth and job training and somewhere for them to go and get food and wash up and things like that. So, a few years ago, Rosewood and Pear began partnering to find a more permanent East Portland home for both organizations. And in 2022, we landed on an ideal site on Southeast Stark and 141st Street. It's very close to David Douglas High School, if you've ever been over there. It includes a large central building, which currently houses our community center and Pear Bike Works bike shop. 2 smaller houses which currently house Rosewood staff offices, and a 3/4 of an acre abandoned green woodland space, essentially. And with PSAF's help, we were able to close on that property actually like 2 weeks ago. So that's very exciting. Which means I can actually submit my permits now, which is amazing. So yeah, it brings us one step closer to making our East Portland Community Hub a reality. Just a bit of context to set up kind of why we're doing this work in our space in this area. So we are east of I-205 and south of I-84. It is the most obvious example of redlining in this city. If you've driven down Stark, then you have seen the flip from west of 205 to east of 205. You see the trees disappear. You see the blacktop pop up. We did an asset map recently, and there is one grocery store, one Fred Meyer that serves a 2-mile radius around that Fred Meyer. So if you don't have a car, guess you bus in to buy food for your 6 kids. So my role is converting the abandoned woodland on the property into a regenerative community garden. Having the assistance of PSEF allows us to be really ambitious and creative with the green space. So it's going to be a food forest garden, which is a style of garden that takes inspiration from natural forest ecosystems and focuses on diverse polycultures of perennial plants and trees in order to grow food and other products in a more productive, less labor-intensive, and more ecologically sustainable way. So we're going to have hundreds of plant species on the property, lots of native plants, lots of pollinator plants, a huge focus on fruit trees and shrubs, a huge focus on plants that are culturally appropriate for our diverse community members. And some of the aspects of this project that are really exciting are a rainwater collection system that can collect upwards of 15,000 gallons of rainwater a year, a bioswale for excess rainwater drainage, removal of about 2,500 square feet of asphalt in order to fit 20 raised garden beds for our community members to grow their own food. Street trees surrounding the property in order to reduce urban heat island effects. Community garden workshops for free for our community, and youth training for kids who want careers in urban agriculture to train the next generation of people who are going to be feeding us and our families. So PSAF is what makes all of that possible. This spring we're planting our first perennials on the site. We have tons of opportunities to get involved if that's something you're interested in, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about it.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming and for inviting me to speak here. I'm Steve Chesbrough with Bike Loud PDX, and we are a volunteer-driven organization, no paid staff, and we try to get more people onto bicycles, to try to make it safer and easier and more fun to ride bicycles in Portland. We pressure the city in various ways to uphold its own bike plan, which it seems to forget about a lot. So we lobby the city and sometimes sue the city. We're involved in 2 lawsuits against the city of Portland right now. And one of our programs that we do is the Bike Buddy program, which you probably haven't heard of. We've had it for 3 years now, and only 19 people have gone through it. And so the idea is a wonderful one, though. It's like some people came up to the table tonight were saying, well, I would like to bicycle, but I'm a little scared to bike around Portland. So the idea is someone who is interested in bicycling and maybe doesn't feel comfortable doing it. Maybe they used to ride in a different part of the country, or maybe they haven't ridden in many years, but they would like to. We hook that person up with an experienced rider, and for a one-time mentoring program, so you would talk to each other and then go on a ride together, and the experienced person would help you learn how to ride around traffic, what the rules of the road are, anything else, how to navigate. I mean, you could do it more than once, but it's usually considered once, and then you're on your way. So we decided to write a PSEF grant to try to build up this program. We think it's a wonderful program, but how do we find people? Yeah, we have plenty of people who want to mentor, but the mentees are usually people who don't know they need this program, right? So, like we've done some outreach through bike shops, thinking that if someone's buying a bike or getting their bike fixed, they might know that they could use some help like this. So this grant that we applied for through PSEF is to hire a person. Well, it's not going to be an employee, it'll be a contract person for 3 years. So we applied for a $310,000 grant, which was way more than our annual budget many times over of our organization. So we applied for this in order to hire a contract with a person to manage the program and do outreach and try to build it up, especially in areas of the city that are underserved, right, where it's harder to ride a bike in certain areas because the city hasn't done much to improve bicycling, but we still want to get people involved. So it's in line with PSEF's idea of underserved populations of what we want to do with this. So what do you know? We got the grant. So we have a director. Thank you. Yeah, we're very excited about it. And our goal is to get 100 people a year going through this rather than just 6 or 7 a year as we've been doing. And we advertised in various community organizations to try to get a cross-section. We really wanted someone who was used to working with underserved communities and with organizing people more than somebody who has a bicycling background. We got a lot of applications, and we're on the verge of announcing the winner of this process. So we should have the person within a month or so on board and ready. So if any of you are interested in riding a bike or helping someone else ride a bike as a mentor or a mentee, we're very excited about it. And if your organization wants to apply for a PSEF grant, we totally endorse the process. It worked great.
Okay, I'm back. So, Bird Alliance of Oregon, in addition to our conservation advocacy work locally and across the state, and our education work that we do, we also uniquely run the largest wildlife hospital in the region. And that hospital is currently located up in on our Northwest Portland campus, and it is in dire need of repair and expansion. And we have recently just closed on a new location for that wildlife hospital, and it is literally the parcel right adjacent to us. As part of that project, we were fortunate enough to find a parcel that was large enough to host that wildlife care center and all of the facilities adjacent to it, but also allow space for other projects. And we're also fortunate to receive 2 PSEF grants for 2 projects that will get started in the next month at the site. And one of them is a community solar project, which is in collaboration with Apano, which is our 82nd neighbor and also our collaborator in a lot of different spaces, and Bonneville Environmental Foundation, which we are going to be installing a 2-acre solar array on the southward facing slope on the southern portion of our parcel, which will create electricity credits or energy credits that we can distribute. Pano will distribute to their community members, their low-income community members in the area. That will offset their utility costs for 20 years. Which is a very cool project. And the community solar project concept in general is a really exciting space that PSEF is really investing a lot of funds towards. Verde just finished along with the Port of Portland, a project just north of here for a community solar project, and there is a Collaborating for Climate initiative that devotes how many million? 32 million to do several other projects of that type that really increases the accessibility of renewable energy to apartment residents or low-income homeowners that can't have solar on their properties. So that's one project, and the other is a restoration effort on our site. We will be restoring 4 acres of wildlife habitat on this brownfield site that will be reintroducing native oak woodland, coniferous forests, mixed, just a whole slew of different habitats across this 12 acres. And that's going to be in collaboration with our Green Leaders program, which is a partnership with Hacienda CDC and Verde, in which we train youth participants currently in environmental education, but we're expanding that into a green cohort that will learn the field of restoration work and be participating in that effort over that time. So these are just 2 examples of projects that there are literally, how many?
Where is that project? This 12 acres?
Right here. Yeah, between here and 82nd. Yeah, it's that open field in immediate adjacency. And we'll be unveiling other parts of that project as that campaign moves forward. But those are just 2 great examples, I think, of what PSEF can do and is doing.
Wasn't that inspiring? Yeah. So I'm going to make a few announcements while I hope my Rumble teammates will collect questions from the crowd. First, are there any elected officials here? If anybody here who is on the city council, or if you wave, say hi.
Hey, I'm the staffer for Councilor Tiffany Koyama Lane. She was invited here tonight, wanted to be here, but had a conflict. So my name's Emery, and she sends her best to everyone, and this was incredible presentation.
Okay. We usually end these rumbles with a call to action, and I have a few actions and things to share with you. But first of all, PSEF-related action is, if you will take what you learned here tonight and go and have a conversation or 2 with your friends, with people you know in the community. Think about possibilities if you're connected with nonprofits for projects, because we want everybody in the community to know and understand what's going on with PSEF. And then one of our tabling people here is, and can you put the very last slide up and then we'll go back, is Don't Shoot PDX. And so they're here partly to the next one, I think. Oh, no, the next one. Very last one. Yes. Okay. For 11 years, they've been doing a Reclaim MLK march on Martin Luther King Day on the 20th, and they're doing it again this year. And there's an art build at PNCA on the 18th. So if you want to come and help make signs and build art for the march itself starts at 1 o'clock at 700 North Rosa Parks. So we're encouraging folks to come out and march with Don't Shoot PDX, and there's more information on the table back there once we finish now if you go back one slide, the Tributary Alliance is, oh, okay. You're doing fine, Jim. The Tributary Alliance is a group of organizations that have been working. The Rumble's sort of a project of the Tributary Alliance, and our next meeting is Sunday the 12th at the Braided River Gallery at Lloyd Center. We gather at 4 and the meeting begins at 4:30. All are welcome to come. And then our own beloved Barbara Bernstein has her radio premiere on Locus Focus on the 27th at 10 a.m. Chasing Chimeras, the Lure of Deceptive Climate Solutions. A look at all the false solutions. So you get to hear the video. It's being unveiled for the first time. Let me see if I have it. I think that's it. We're going to start taking questions as soon as Leslie comes and gives me some questions to ask. So I hope I have a couple. Okay, maybe probably for Sam. Can you talk a little bit about opportunities? This is dear to my heart as a labor person. Opportunities for engaging labor unions in terms of union apprenticeships and union jobs for the Portland workforce.
Yeah, so this is an area that's been one. We have consistently funded pre-apprenticeship programs, Constructing Hope, Portland Youth Builders, Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center, Oregon Tradeswomen. So a lot of our work is getting folks in funding those pre-apprenticeship programs, 8 to 12 weeks, so that they can get folks ready. And a lot of those organizations have relationships with our labor unions, so they can bring them into, and some direct entry into the apprenticeship program. So they've got a direct path in there and can then get working and get on the job pay as we go through there. I think the one element of the work that we've done, and we're starting to see this as we evolve our work and move into bigger projects, is when we talk about some of our residential construction projects, there is continued work to be done with that sector, which is primarily non-labor, and that's a lot of the work that we do. And as we move into our larger projects, our commercial projects, our bigger multifamily projects, that's been a lot of the work where we've been able to pull in folks from our apprenticeship or our various labor apprenticeship programs. And so there's still continued work I would acknowledge that needs to happen between, I would say, labor and work within our residential sector, and particularly in helping bridge that gap and understanding how do we create more clear pathways for contractors that are growing into that space, contractors to tap apprentices coming out of various labor apprenticeship programs. But that's work that we've started, and I would say it's work that we're going to need to continue to do. But certainly the clearest paths are working with our various pre-apprenticeship programs that we've been funding to make your journey through them.
Thanks. A lot said. This one, I think, is for you, Abasi. What upskilling or advancement opportunities are you experiencing or aware of as a result of PSEF workforce development?
Yeah, thank you. I was hoping somebody would give me the opportunity to talk about this a little bit, because I just didn't quite have time originally. But I can kind of piggyback off of what Sam was talking about. So PSEF has actually really heavily impacted my personal life and my own career evolution and professional development. Sam mentioned several pre-apprenticeships that PSEF funds, and one of those is Portland Youth Build. And I actually went through that program after working in the grocery industry for like 7 years and just not really seeing a lot of advancement opportunities for myself. And so I heard about this pre-apprenticeship. I went through it, and it gave me a lot of basic carpentry skills. It opened up the doors for me to have opportunities that I had never considered, like joining the electricians union, joining the carpenters union, a lot of different tradeswork opportunities. But for me, above all, it introduced me to green building. It introduced me to energy efficiency, and it introduced me to a lot of those types of concepts that, like home performance, that I had just never heard of. And from there, I was able to move into 2 internships with nonprofits who are also funded by PSEF, Earth Advantage and the African Alliance the African American Alliance for Home Ownership, where I was able to learn a lot more about different opportunities in the energy efficiency world and in the home performance world. And ultimately, I was able to meet the team that I now work with due to job shadowing opportunities that were introduced to me through an internship. And so it was like it was like a whirlwind of a year. And there were a lot of incredible people I was able to meet through these PSEF funded programs. I actually, and then I'll wrap up, but I'm actually on the board for a nonprofit called the Home Performance Guild of Oregon, and one of our major initiatives, we're also PSEF funded. If you're not sensing a theme here, that's what it is. But one of our major initiatives is to continue to be involved with workforce development programs similarly to the ones that I was able to take advantage of, to provide more training for folks who are already, in industry, more training for folks who want to be in the industry. There were so many opportunities and programs I was able to go through. I actually forgot one of the most important ones, which was that someone from PSEF directly reached out to me when I was still trying to figure out the evolution of what I was hoping to be able to make of my experience now going through these different internships and whatnot. A PSEF team member reached out to me directly and said, "Hey, we have this opportunity. There's a training coming up. Not only are we going to pay you a stipend for being there," which is so important because when you're in the middle, maybe you're not employed, you're looking for opportunities, you're trying really hard to make these connections. If somebody says, "Hey, be here for a week," like they better be paying you for your time, right? So not only did I get to become a credentialed building analyst technician at the end of this course, after of course passing tests and whatnot, I still had to show merit. But what these PSEF programs were able to do for me was they put me in the room, and so now I'm credentialed. It made me hireable, and 2 years later, here I am talking to everybody about these PSEF programs. So,
this is probably mostly for you. Have you seen examples of PSEF serving as an inspiration and model for other cities around the country?
That's a great question because I actually have spent the last few years trying to share this model with other cities and jurisdictions, and I've learned that a lot of cities don't actually have the ability to pass a ballot measure at the local level. They actually require their state legislature has to approve a ballot measure before it can go to the city. And so usually state legislatures, including I would say in Oregon, are more conservative than cities. So like for example in Boston, which has a very progressive mayor and city council, they have to get their state legislature to approve, which has been really stopping this. And even in the state of Oregon, due to the legislature also being more conservative, they did pass a preemption. A local preemption saying they tried to pass a great important bill called the Student Success Act, but snuck within it at the last minute was a preemption that stops any other local jurisdiction from using the exact same revenue mechanism.
Oh no.
But you can use other revenue mechanisms. There's very few revenue mechanisms that we have in Portland, in Oregon. So it has challenges, but I would say that some jurisdictions are still trying to find creative ways to get around it. Hopefully we'll see that in the next year or two. So it's not hopeless, but I am sad that more cities haven't been able to, either because of structural problems or local preemptions here in Oregon.
Thank you. Let's see, this side probably. Which projects or types of projects offer some of the greatest potential for carbon emissions reductions? Maybe Sam, or carbon capture.
I appreciate this because so much of and I appreciate you giving us the full name at the beginning: Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund. We talk about this often. I say that if honestly, if best emissions reductions was our objective, we would be trying to reforest, plantations in southern Georgia. There's other projects if the most efficient reduction is your objective. But a big part of PSF is about driving community benefits, making sure that given the taxes are ultimately paid from here, that the benefits come from here. And so it's almost like choosing a favorite child. There are many projects. I would certainly say that we always try to look at it the full spectrum of the benefits. But whether we're talking fuel switching, meaning getting people out of fossil fuel consuming vehicles into electric vehicles, or getting people moving via sidewalks, walking, biking, rolling to school, those are great benefits. When we talk about our community solar, really, really great benefits from theirs in terms of emissions reductions, as well as tree planting. When we're talking about planting big trees that sequester carbon in their trees, in the roots, those are really big benefits. So there's a suite of them, and we often try to not focus just there, but those are some of the certainly some of the most important ones when we talk about emissions reduction. Notwithstanding also just retrofitting homes and getting people off of, if anyone's on oil, getting them off of oil heating, but certainly also getting folks to change out their inefficient systems.
Thank you. Two people asked questions about what programs does the Clean Energy Fund have with renters. So I don't know if any of you or who should answer that.
A little bit of both. Do you want to go first?
Right now I'll say this. It's sometimes the community grants. I mean, I will say I appreciate all what you've shared. That is beautiful. That is a beautiful arc and a journey. And so we have over 180 grantees, and if you include our mini grantees, we have well over 400 grantees or so. So I think it's what I will say is we have a wide spectrum of programs that are certainly targeting renters. We've just went through a contracting process now. So by late summer of this year, you should see one of our programs that are going to launch. It's our Clean Energy and Single Family Homes program. That is one of our strategic programs, and that'll have a path that directly targets renter-occupied households. So that'll target households that are focused on renters. That is one of our most direct ones. But then we make a tremendous amount of investments in multifamily housing, in affordable housing, where we've got folks that are renting. And so we've got well over, I would say at this point, well over $150 million of investments going to that sector. And that is all focused on reducing energy bills, making homes more efficient, healthy for renters in those spaces.
Good.
Yeah, and I can just speak through the lens I have from working at the Community Energy Project and the kind of things and initiatives that we have going. I was so excited to hear Community Solar come up today because that is also a program that we're really deeply invested in. I wish that my brain could hold on to metrics and numbers so I could share them with you, but I know that we have been really aggressively working to sign people up for Community Solar, which is a bill discount program for your electricity utility bill. And I want to say between 2024 and 2023, I think we had something around like 200% increase in signups and folk that we've been able to place with projects. And that does not matter if you're a homeowner, if you're a renter of a single family home, you could be in a multifamily complex, you could be in manufactured housing. If you're paying for your electricity bill, and your income qualified, you can sign up for Community Solar and you can see savings. And that stacks as well with other income qualified bill discount programs that our advocacy team has worked so hard to push our utility companies to make sure that not only are these programs created and available, but also that the administering of them has been built from the ground up with vulnerable populations in mind. A a lot of folk that we work with are elder and don't have access to things like email. If I ask them, hey, can you go ahead and e-sign this for me real quick with your signature and then bounce it back to me, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? And so it's really important that when you're building these programs, you know who is your audience, you know? And so between our income qualified bill discount programs, including community solar, and then I also touched briefly on our workshops that our education team puts together. They're seasonal, but they're year round. So in the wintertime, we're focusing on reaching out to folk and saying, hey, you're renting, maybe you're not able to make the decision to get off of oil because, yes, there are still a lot of homes in Portland that have oil. So maybe you're not able to say, hey, I want to install a heat pump here because you don't own the property. But what you can do is you can still take measures to make sure that your home is as safe and comfortable as you can possibly make it. And so those are the types of things that we try to educate folk on. Lead safety, using window kits, making sure your home is as sealed as possible. Those are all renter-friendly activities.
I just wanted to say that I don't think it can be overstated the importance of green spaces to renters. Like, the majority of the people in our community at Rosewood are renters, whether you're a large family or you're just an individual young person renting an apartment. Most of the time, you can't do anything with your yard if you do happen to be blessed with a yard. You can't grow your own food, even if you're on like a balcony or something. Sometimes you have regulations there. Just having green space to recreate in, green space to grow your own food in. And it's also renters have less access to things like City of Portland's city gardens. Because of the wait lists to get on those, if you're living in a temporary space, like, you might not want to put in that application to sit on that wait list for a few years if I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be living here. So, yeah, I think that a lot of the green space things that PCEF is funding is just as important to renters as the initiatives that are targeted towards the rental themselves. So, yeah, I just want to make sure.
That's a great point, and I think it's true for a lot of the city investments, whether it's management of our tree canopy, which is accessible to all, especially with the focused investment in East Portland, and it's the management of our natural areas, which is partially being funded by PCEF, which is in communities in North Portland and that have less access and will benefit from more access. In addition to the Collaborating for Climate investments of increasing transit access along 82nd, which is going to have that indirect benefit to a huge swath of East Portland. So there's a lot of direct benefits to renters, but many also indirect benefits.
Great, thank you. Just a follow-up here. If you can talk about the financial threshold for getting assistance for home improvements. And any other remarks?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I would say we have a lot of different programs where we're able to assist folk with, and they all have their own different thresholds, but typically we're around 80% of Portland's median financial index, which you can find that information online. But I would say first step, if you think that you might qualify or you're interested in our services, the first thing you can do is go to our website or come find me sometime after the program, and we can set you up with a free home energy assessment. That's when we're gonna be able to go into your home, determine what things you might be eligible for, and so I would say if you're curious, start there.
Thank you. Yeah. We just have time for a couple more. Somebody had a question for you, Corey. How do you see the importance of your work in terms of climate impacts on food and water scarcity?
That's a really good question, because I think that that's something I was kind of freestyling a little bit during my talk, because after kind of listening to their portion of the talk, I was like, with the thing that I wrote, it might not be super obvious how a community garden project necessarily connects to a climate initiative and carbon reductions, but I think that there's a lot of indirect effects that growing food can have on, and just having green space in general, on carbon emissions. One big one is reducing food miles. By not in our neighborhood, there's one grocery store. It's Fred Meyer. Fred Meyer doesn't got a lot of local produce. If you're getting your produce from the garden that's growing your food down the street versus from the Fred Meyer that you're either driving to from 2 miles away, or even if you're busing, that food still had to go on a truck from who knows, California, who knows where, to get to that place. So just by having food growing in your neighborhood, that's reducing food miles for a lot of people. Things like just having more trees, having just biomass, like just the real focus of having this food forest is to be able to grow more than you'd be able to in a traditional community garden, because you can work in layers. I could have herbaceous layer on the ground. I could have a tree canopy layer, an understory layer. I could have vines growing up the trees, and that's, once you start to really calculate that in, you're exponentially increasing the amount of biomass that is sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. And the more you can do that on more sites, I think that the more carbon you are sequestering. And compared to what's happening on the site now, which is basically just feet and feet of blackberry brambles and English ivy that we have been hand pulling for a year at this point. Like, I mean, this is not only so much more useful for the people in the neighborhood, but it's also just sequestering more and more carbon from the environment. And like, part of it is making this a model so that if this, works, which fingers crossed, right? But if this works, then this can serve as a model for somebody else who has access to an abandoned lot that is not really growing anything, but you're like, well, I can put 100 plants here. Like, I think that's exciting. Yeah.
So I did not think I was going to put on my grocery hat today, but if I could also just say, working in grocery, I worked at one of the major grocery chain corporations around. You would all know what its name is. But the amount of waste that just my one single produce department would produce every single day, from vegetables and fruit and just produce that didn't get used, but was past its expiration date, that wasn't donated, that just immediately went into this bin that was like this tall, and it was a square, so it's just as wide, it's a huge cube, and it just gets sent off. That's one department in one store. So you just keep multiplying that exponentially, and that's so much waste. And so the more that our communities are able to divest from these like large scale grocery stores, that's huge right there too.
Yeah. Just a couple more, and then we'll end. But it's hard not to ask all of these questions. They're great. Have NGOs receiving PSEF funds been engaged in greater communication, collaboration, and community building with one another as a result of being part of the program? That's for anyone.
I mean, sure, I can. Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of why when I was, doing interviews and things, and I got this position was because of the connections that I had to the community. I started off as just kind of a farmer. Like, I lived on a peach orchard in Hood River picking peaches, and we drove them into Portland and sold them at farmers markets, and I met a ton of farmers that way. And through those connections, I've been able to connect a lot of those growers and a lot of the organizations that those growers work with to our project, and also connect our resources to other people's projects. And what's kind of come from that is that, Rosewood has a team, Pear has a team. I'm the only person who's on the garden project. So it's me, whatever volunteers I can scrounge up, and whatever contractors I can hire. We are super underspent on the grant right now because almost every bit of labor that has been done on this project so far has been from other organizations sending people out to our site to help us for free. That is amazing, that we're able to have these, relationships with folks. And then there's also the fact that literally on our stretch of Stark, there's 2 other community agricultural projects happening. And I literally met Jermaine from Play, Grow, Learn earlier today, and we're going to collaborate on basically us filling in the holes where they can't provide certain things, and they can fill in holes where we can't provide certain things. And so, at least in the case of our project, collaboration has been so key between organizations, whether they're nonprofits, whether they're for-profit farmers, whether they're people in the community and just volunteers in the community. It's been a huge connection between all of us as this project has gone forward.
Just as a very new grantee, I've already been involved or invited to a larger celebration amongst all grantees of this last RFP, and PSEF took a lot of intention in the design of that to really sort of force collaboration, and for folks to be thinking about how their projects could improve in the future with additional collaboration, and to be learning from each other, and really to continue to evolve and get better. I think that is what PSEF has done over its 7 years of existence, and what it's really setting up a structure to do.
How about Portland needs protection from catastrophic fires, train derailments, etc. Can PSEP funds go toward preventing and mitigating those sort of disasters that we see coming up?
This gets complicated. So most of our focus is on mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, reducing emissions, but in doing so, helping community directly. That said, climate resiliency is big, adaptation is big. It's something that we're trying to figure out, how do we put sideboards that make sense and have a framework that makes sense. Because one thing I can tell you is that we talk about resiliency, and I can guarantee between someone here to someone there, you will each have a different definition of what resiliency is. And folks can tie anything to it. So it's been work that we've done. We certainly invest in reducing emissions and look to every co-benefit. Every time you put a heat pump in, you're reducing emissions, but hopefully you're also adding cooling to the household. Every time you plant a tree, you're sequestering carbon, but you're also ultimately adding shade 20 years down the road, or however down the road. So that's the way we view it. That said, I appreciate the question. I think it's an area where we're going to continue to evolve in terms of how we collectively develop a community-wide framework for how we invest in climate resiliency. So it's something we're interested in, but our lens has always been emissions reductions first and community benefits first.
And okay, I'm going to ask one last question, and then for real. Urban heat islands outside of City of Portland boundaries. How does PSEF impact East County?
Our resources are coming from the city. We invest in the city. That said, we can train folks because workforce does not stay one place. Workforce is regional. So we do have the ability to train folks within the metropolitan statistical area. So I think one of the key ways is in investing in a workforce, growing that workforce so that as folks seek to expand the tree canopy, invest in that, maintain that we've got a bigger pool of folks working on that we're not just talking, they're not just able to work in Portland, but they're able to work in Gresham, they're able to work in Washington County, and so forth. So that's our main avenue, is just making sure we build that ecosystem up for the region.
Great. And if an organization wanted to talk to PSEF about a grant, do they contact you or?
Take a look at our website, get onto our email list, so that way you can stay tuned to when our grant opportunities come up. You can certainly talk to me, but I will point you back there.
And the last question is, everyone who worked on PSAP, if you could raise your hand or stand up so we can see.